Please be seated. We sang the first verse of the hymn because that's the text for the sermon. The hymn is the text for the sermon because I am breaking all the rules this Advent. You know, we're not supposed to sing Christmas carols during Advent. In our tradition, there are some people who really, really adhere to that rule. I was at a meeting with several of my colleagues, and this colleague was saying, nope, we're not going to light the star. We have this Christmas star in the sanctuary, but we're not lighting the star until Christmas Eve, because it's not Christmas yet. And I was kind of like, well, you know. So, oh, holy night. Holy. When I say the word holy, what comes to mind? What comes to mind if I say holy? Good? Spiritual? Sacred. Sacred. Who's holy? God. God's holy. God is glorious, separate from us, dwelling in light, kind of overwhelming. That's holy. That's the sense you get of holy, especially in the Old Testament. The holiness of God is really a terrifying thing. It's powerful. It can overwhelm frail human beings. There's a story in the Old Testament about the Ark of the Covenant. You know the Ark of the Covenant? You've seen the movie, right? The Ark of the Covenant. So there really was an Ark of the Covenant. The pieces of the Ten Commandments were really in it. And it was a central item for Israel's worship. But one time, the Philistines captured the Ark and took it off to Philistia. And later on, the Israelites fought against them. They won the Ark back, and they're taking the Ark home. But see, there were rules about how the Ark was to be transported. It was supposed to be transported on poles on the shoulders of priests. But I guess everybody was tired from fighting the Philistines, so they put it on a cart. And there were these two guys walking along the cart, donkeys pulling the cart, and there are two guys walking alongside, and the Ark starts to tip over. And so these two guys rush over to stop it from falling off and touching the ground. And both of them are instantly killed because they're not priests. They shouldn't be touching holy things. And furthermore, it shouldn't have been on the cart in the first place. The holiness of God just, boom, they're gone. Anybody remember those guys' names? Me neither. But it happened. It's in there. It's in there. So the holiness of God is a scary, and that's not just for long ago. Right? In Jesus' time, this idea of God's holiness was still very much alive. If you think of the high priest going into the Holy of Holies, the central room of the temple, the place where the presence of God dwelled. And when the high priest went in there, and only the high priest could go in, only once a year, when he went in there, they would tie a rope around his ankle so that if he was struck dead by the glory and holiness of God, they could pull him out. Oh, holy night. Our holy night is the messy birth of a baby. Can you think of anything more opposite than this exalted idea of holiness? A baby coming into the world, helpless and bloody. That's our holy night. Jesus transformed the idea of holiness so that holiness became not that which is only of God and fearful to humans, but that holiness is what transforms people into being holy. God's holiness doesn't destroy, God's holiness gives life. It doesn't get rid of the bad, it makes the bad good. Now that's holiness. And that's the way Jesus lived out holiness in his life. Think about it. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God in human flesh. and there's a woman who is ritually unclean. According to all the rules of the day, she shouldn't come anywhere near places of worship. In fact, she shouldn't touch other people because she has a bleeding disorder and she shouldn't be around them. She reaches out and she touches Jesus, and she's healed and made whole in an instant. The holiness of God brings wholeness and salvation and life. Oh, holy, holy night that brings life and salvation. It's a great song. When's the last time you sang that song?
A year ago.
Last year? No, you didn't sing it here. It's not in any of our hymnals. We don't sing it. This is the first time in 15 years we've sung that song in this room. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm breaking all the rules.
That's my favorite now.
It was written in France in 1847. A guy named Placide Cappeau. See, back in those days, the local pastor, the local priest, the local parish priest could go out into town and say, "Hey, Placide, can you write us a new poem for Christmas Eve service this year?" And there were people that did stuff like that. I'll be coming by one of your homes later this week. So Placide writes the poem, and he says, this is so good, we gotta set it to music. But he wasn't a musician. So he gets in touch with one of his friends, a guy named Adolphe Adam, who had written ballets and symphonies and orchestral pieces for people all over the world. And he puts an original score to the poem, and we get "O Holy Night." And it just becomes instantly popular. I mean, it spreads throughout the whole country. Until a few years later, Placide leaves the church, joins the Socialist Party, and becomes an atheist. All of a sudden, the church doesn't like the song anymore. All the church hierarchy is like, this is not a good song. And besides, what's just as bad is Adolphe Adam, he happens to be a Jew. So the church hierarchy said, this song is banned because of its complete lack of musical taste and total absence of the spirit of religion. Right. So they try to ban the song, but of course it doesn't work. It spreads. And there's a guy in the United States, a guy named John Sullivan Dwight, who sees this poem, hears this song, he decides he needs to translate this into English, especially because of the third verse. The third verse, which says, "Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother. And in his name all oppression cease." Think of those words in 1850s United States. Mr. Dwight was an abolitionist. He was working for the end of slavery. He translated the song into English so it could be sung, and these words could reverberate throughout churches all over the country and be one piece, one tiny piece in encouraging the freedom of people who were enslaved. That's a pretty good use for a Christmas carol, I would say. And this hymn just kept getting more and more popular, and kept on spreading. And there's another thing about this hymn that's really fascinating, and that is that it was the first song ever transmitted over the radio. On Christmas Eve in 1906, Reginald Fenissenden, he was a 33-year-old guy who had worked for Thomas Edison. He was a professor and a radio operator. He had a new kind of generator so that he could project voice over radio, because up until that time, I remember the first things that were sent over radio were things in Morse code. So he had arranged this thing to transmit voice and sound over the radio. And on Christmas Eve in 1906, he spoke into the microphone, and it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree read the Christmas story. And after that, he picked up his violin and played O Holy Night. So O Holy Night was the first song ever played over the radio waves. It must have seemed like angels to those guys and women who were radio operators. They're waiting for beep, 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 and they hear O Holy Night, Christmas. O Holy, the night when Jesus was born, the night when God came into the world, the night when God came into the world to make us holy. And as we sing this song, as this song has been sung over the decades, it's been a way that God has come into our lives. That we have realized that God is changing the world, that God is changing us, that God is making us whole, that God is making us whole.